Oh, you know the deal, my friends. The Chicago Bears are on tap. Both teams, unsurprisingly, at 2-1, entering a Week 4 tilt. It matters for both of these squads and where they can go this season. We're going to break down the matchups, talk about how strikingly similar both of these rosters may be, and where the New York Football Giants can take advantage. Yes, my friends. On a Thursday, you know it's OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where we are your host over here, Adam Armbrecht, breaking down the Brooklyn Nets on the Locked On Nets podcast. My boy Doug Norrie, and yonder there, the healthy, wealthy, and well-informed Mr. Andrew Makowitz, as we look to break down the Chicago Bears.
Yes, Adam. This is going to be such an interesting matchup. We talked about it on yesterday's show. Much like Brian Daboll did in the Tennessee Titans game, in the Cowboys game, we are turning the page and we are looking forward to this matchup against the Chicago Bears. And Adam, you and I were talking before the show. It is really uncanny how similar these two teams are going into each other. It's like it reminds me of the Spider-Man meme where they like both are pointing to each other at the same time, and it's like who's what here? Considering like it's a team that has new head coaching, new GMs, young quarterbacks. They're trying to figure out what they are, and hopefully trying to run the football while trying to fix an offensive line all at once. Like it is crazy how similar these two teams are.
You know, one just briefly that will not be similar about these two teams. That's going to be the legacy game classic uniforms that'll be out there for the New York Football Giants. I'm talking about that sweet little red trim inside of the letters. I know everyone likes to color wash the white uniforms. No. These are the iconic New York Football Giants uniforms that I can't wait to see. Don't have to belabor it, but that's right. I'm high fashion.
Field Yates came out. He's like, imagine Saquon Barkley in the throwback jersey. It's like guaranteed 275 yards and 3 touchdowns for that man. So he's already feeling it, much like we are. Like everybody loves the old throwbacks.
So, as you said about the similarities between it, I think in so many ways it starts with the players under center. And not that you're looking for a way to throw Daniel Jones a bone or a compliment, but one of the biggest concerns for the Chicago Bears is the way Justin Fields plays the position and what is limiting him in terms of the offensive line in front of him. I think that he's getting scrutinized more this season for what he's responsible for, as opposed to right now for Daniel Jones and the Giants. It's more, we don't know what he's responsible for because we know what other players are putting on their plate and putting ultimately in Daniel Jones' face.
Yeah, I mean, they've only let Justin Fields throw the ball 45 times through 3 games. So that's an average of 15 throws a game.
You want more? You want more than that?
I mean, listen, he's only had 23 total passes completed so far this season, and they're 2-1. When you think about like how crazy that is, in his 3 games, he's had about a 50% completion percentage, 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and has thrown for 121 yards, 70 yards, and 106 yards.
He has 297 yards through 3 games. He's under 100 yards per game. That's not what you want.
He's averaging over 1 interception a game and almost under 100 yards per game. They are winning in spite of his performance on the field. But as much like the Giants have had struggles at their offensive line, the offensive line is very young, very learning. Yeah. I believe the left tackle and the right tackle are both drafted in the previous draft in the late rounds. They are rebuilding this offensive line on the fly. And their offensive coordinator and head coach are basically saying, we know we can't have Justin Fields drop back. He has more pressures per drop back attempt than Daniel Jones does. Daniel Jones is number 2 in the league. Justin Fields is number 1. They are trying to protect them by running the football, and they're effective in doing so.
Yeah, I got to say, man, and the way I talk about it with Daniel Jones in year number 4, year number 2 for a quarterback, it makes me think about a Trevor Lawrence, right? Gets a new head coach system, a lot of new things going on there. And it didn't look great early in the season or, first game, but you're seeing some of these flashes. You're seeing what the kid is capable of. I mean, you go back to last year and think about like Justin Fields was out there, man. Like he was out there a lot. And I don't know how you parse this. By the end of the year, he was throwing 26 of 39 for 285 against the Vikings, 67 completion percentage, had the touchdown, no INTs. But like he finished, and the reason why I bring it up is like he finishes his year with 7 touchdowns, 10 interceptions in 2021. The R of 31.4. Like all of the concerns are there. He's gone only in the wrong direction to this point. The completion percentage has dropped by 8% through 3 games. We know the yardage is bad. The yards per pass actually isn't terrible. It's the attempts and the ability to do so. The touchdown interception ratio is bad, and the QBR is atrocious, down from 31.4 to 23. Like, if you want to paint a better picture of Daniel Jones, the dude ain't driving the truck off the cliff. And it looked like, I mean, this is like, you can put it on other people too, but Justin Fields is on the razor's edge here of not being a starting NFL quarterback if things go like this for the rest of the season.
Well, and Adam, the similarities between the two teams don't just stop at the porous offensive line and the questionable quarterback play. They have their own questions at wide receiver. They, going into the season, the Bears were talked about as the team that might have the weakest wide receiving core in all of the NFL. And to highlight that, they are
hold my beer, said the New York Giants, looking to fill up that injury report.
Well, yeah, as more and more players get injured, it's looking, you may trade right now what they have for what we have. But right now, Equiminius St. Brown, Darnell Mooney, and our old friend Dante Pettis are the top 3 wide receivers that the Chicago Bears are putting out there right now. And
better be careful saying that name. A lot of Giants fans think they've been a number 2 on the Giants roster. So,
well, I mean, I'll tell you something right now, Adam. Dante Pettis could help.
Would you take him? Would you take him in a pinch?
I would take him immediately on this team because he has the ability. Listen, he has 1 reception on the year for 51 yards. He caught a 51-yard touchdown pass to basically win the game against the San Francisco 49ers in week 1. At least he's contributing in some capacity at some level when we have Kenny Golladay that's not able to catch basically anything at this point. But the similarities are there. You look at the offensive line being young and starting to learn. A younger quarterback that's making mistakes and is getting pressured constantly. That has led them to be the number 1 rushing attack in the league. Because we mentioned all these crazy stats, like he's throwing for under 100 yards. How could they be 2-1? The answer is because they have the highest rush play percentage in the entire league at 65%, which leads them to the number 2 rushing offense in the league at 186 yards a game. So they're
almost
running
400 on the year so far through 3 games.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable.
I mean, sorry. I apologize. 400 yards through 2 games just between David Montgomery and Kahlil Herbert, to say nothing of Fields and some other players that have contributed.
Oh yeah, I mean they're even further along. I think they're over 500 yards on the season. Yeah. So they are running it at a 65% clip, and they're running it effectively, Adam. That's why they don't have to sit back and close their eyes and hope and pray that Justin Fields is okay. They are yards per rush. They are 5.4 yards per rush per game, which is great. Anything over 5 is good. That's good for 5th in the league, Adam. So they're running it a ton. They're picking up yards, and each attempt is getting them forward and not having to have to play behind the chains. So, like, when you hear all this, like, you feel the similarities, but how does our defense need to react to this similar type of offense that they're probably seeing across them in practice all the time?
Yeah, the interesting thing to me, the quick note is the idea of now Herbert seems like the guy that he's building up, right? You're going to see him become, I think, that more dynamic back out of the 2. He's the start of the season, 9 carries, then 4 carries, and this past week some injuries, 20 carries, 157 yards. Like, the dude pops off. The one thing is the double-headed monster here. But now the last 2 weeks, the Giants defensively have given up 100 yards on the ground to 1 player, not in totality. A single player has had that, to say nothing of some of the secondary contributors. And the question that it comes into is, we had talked about it yesterday about O'Shane Ximines, although we could put him in the mix here probably too. But Azeez Ojulari and Kayvon Thibodeau, they weren't able to get pressure. They played like 60% and 40% respectively. There's some rust to knock off there. But the interior of the defensive line without Leonard Williams had its issues. You only have Dexter Lawrence there. You're shuffling the deck. And the edges, too. Like, I have real concerns about a team that wants to stop their quarterback from using his arm and wants to use their strength, and what might be a really dangerous point for the New York Football Giants defense if they can't contain and work these running backs back into the middle of the field, back into the teeth of the defense. That's going to come down a lot to what Azeez Ojulari and what Kayvon Thibodeau do in terms of read and react. Yeah, you got to go get that pressure, but you also need to be able to get yourself lateral and shut down this run.
I couldn't agree more. And
Thank you.
the issue for the
And the
Giants
show.
is, yeah, you're like, just call it a day. You couldn't have said it better, Adam. I couldn't even add to anything if I tried, but I'll do my best here.
Make an effort.
Because this offensive line is not what it's supposed to be, and they are heavily focused on the run. It really does hurt that Leonard Williams is not going to be out there, because we've seen the stark difference between how this Giants defense looks when Leonard Williams is stopping the run and he is a force of nature. I think it's like 2 yards per attempt more when Leonard Williams is not in the lineup. That is a huge, huge injury for the Giants, and one that they're going to have to figure out how to take advantage of things. You know, you look at Larry Borum is the right tackle for the Bears. He's been okay. 2 sacks allowed, a penalty. You know, he's got a 60 PFF. He's been surprising. But I believe on the left side, their left tackle is a 5th-round draft pick this year out of Southern Utah named Braxton Jones. The Giants are going to have to be able to get pressure or get some type of push, regardless if it's a run or a pass, to really start dictating things at that defensive front against this offensive line and this two-headed monster if David Montgomery is out there and available.
You better believe it. And I think that there's also the secondary element to it. And by the way, like, this is what we had always talked about. I meant to bring it up yesterday too. When you come out of that game against the Dallas Cowboys and you see the Giants get beat up, and they get beat up in the running game a lot too, this is when you point back to Leonard Williams and you say, see, this is what we're talking about when we talk about it's not just about sacks, right? There are things that happen outside of the measurable stats on the sheet that matter. He controls and occupies multiple players on that offensive line. He frees up a Dexter Lawrence. He frees up an Azeez Ojulari, a Kayvon Thibodeau, to be able to go and be at their most effective. Now, that being said, this offensive line is not good enough for the Chicago Bears, where Wink Martindale shouldn't be able to figure this out. And the secondary piece that I didn't mention there is the secondary for the Giants, right? The Xavier McKinneys of the world, the Julian Loves, the Dane Beltons. You've got to manufacture some ability to get pressure and bring those blitzes from different sides. It didn't happen against the Dallas Cowboys, but I expect if you throw a couple extra bodies, you better break through. And that they ran blitzes last week and they didn't get home on them at all. Like, that's a big problem in terms of what didn't work for Wink Martindale. I have one other player that I wanted to point to, but do you see, is it a get right game for Wink Martindale's defense here? Or are you walking into it with like a little bit of trepidation around, yeah, well, the Dallas Cowboys, it's in Dallas Cowboys offensive line from 3 years ago. And it wasn't Dak Prescott. It was Cooper Rush. We got, are we going to get home on Justin Fields?
Well, it depends how many times they're going to throw the ball. If they're going to run it 65% of the time, and
you only get 15 shots at it.
Yeah, you're not going to have that many opportunities to actually get a sack. I know that sounds funny, tongue in cheek, but it's true. But the Giants, they know what Chicago's going to do. Chicago's going to run the ball almost 3 out of every 4 times, 2 out of every 3 runs. So first down and second down, if they're in front of the chains, they're just going to continue to run the football.
A lot of Ward in this one.
Yeah, well, you have to have bigger bodies out there. You could see Austin Calitro be involved in this more, because you're not as concerned about pass protection or pass defense, because ultimately we're not really concerned about them getting over the top, especially with Xavier McKinney sitting back home. I think you're going to need more bigger bodies to make up for Leonard Williams. I would be surprised if you don't see more of some of the bigger jumbo packages, because the blitzing is not necessarily going to be what ultimately is going to win Wink Martindale's defense the game on this one. It's going to be effectively stopping the run and making Justin Fields and that offensive line drop back more than 15 times in the game.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting things too, because Tay Crowder played every single snap in week 3 against Dallas, and he's one of the guys that is not suited to necessarily be someone that steps up and fills in when you're running a little bit thin on the defensive front and you want to be able to stuff the run. It's one of the things I looked at there. 66% for Ward. He saw a big drop off from week number 2, but different dynamic. I think they, you were worried about, rightfully so, a guy like Tony Pollard having success. And I think Herbert, this is the only problem, is we can talk about that he's not throwing the ball a lot in Justin Fields, and yet it's still the same manufactured success of getting the ball into a playmaking running back's hands and wondering if you're going to be able to be either, Do you stuff it with some bigger bodies, or do you worry about that sideline to sideline speed and some of those bigger plays? And it's why I wondered about a couple of guys, including Micah McFadden saw 47% of the snaps against Dallas. Now, on the one side, you say 47% of the snaps in the game that they lost. That could be a problem. Defense didn't look so good. Is that on him alone? Of course not. But like he's a good downhill bullet kind of guy. I do wonder if you think about occupying that middle of the defensive front there, that offensive line, they want to try to get some of their pushes. If you try to say we got to have gap integrity and we got to plug those holes, because you don't see a lot of that. The Giants defensively against the run, they're not necessarily giving it up in the trenches. They're giving it up when guys get to the edge. And that's what has me of two minds, right? You want big bodies to fix it up, but in a lot of ways, it's the speed and range that you need to have there, and the reaction time to when those runs go to the edge.
Yeah, you're not the only one that's seeing that. That's what Dexter Lawrence came out and said. Dexter Lawrence came out and said,
knew it.
We weren't getting beat in the middle. They were beating us off the edge. And because they were like, are you worried that you don't have
Leonard Hold on. Quick pause here, Dexy. Sexy Dexy. Did you just defer the responsibility to Kayvon Thibodeau and Azeez Ojulari and said, one getting beat in my front yard?
The question was, how much did you miss Leonard Williams because they were beating you guys up in the run game? How did the defensive line hold up? And he's like, they weren't coming up the middle. They weren't attacking me. They were getting out on the edge. And he wasn't necessarily wrong. As you pointed out, that was where some of the bigger plays ended up happening. So he was kind of just saying they weren't – the impact of Leonard Williams wasn't felt up the middle. It was felt more just not being able to get pressure or move him back, and they had to force him on the edge.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to turn it over to the offensive side of the ball for the Giants, though,
sure.
When you start thinking about this, they have some of the same issues that we just mentioned that the Chicago Bears do. We obviously have no Sterling Shepard. It looks like in the early injury reports, we're probably not going to see Wan'Dale Robinson play. We're probably not going to see Kadarius Toney. They're doing a walkthrough during Wednesday's practice, so it's not it's a quote unquote official injury report, but it doesn't really mean anything. I think they're all going to be listed as limited, but they literally didn't have to take a step on the field. The Giants are going to be without Sterling Shepard, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Kadarius Toney as their offensive weapons again. Talk me through a little bit on how you think that's going to impact the potential game plan for the Giants, and then I could talk a little bit about what what you should expect to see from the Chicago Bears.
Listen, I think the offense, as we know, it starts with Saquon Barkley and the success that he has in the running game. And one thing over these first 3 weeks, right? So for week 1, hey, look who's back, right? Barkley's back. Look who's back. Look who's back. Look who's back. And then you fill in the beat from Eminem in your head. But then in week 2, it was, hey, he grinded out some tough yards, but you had to build towards that. And then in week 3, it was kind of not a lot happening here. Nice big, and I'm not even putting it on Barkley, but 36-yard touchdown run where he makes some moves, and that pads at those stats. My concern is, and this is about game script, is, when you try to bang on that door, especially early on, and you don't see some first downs early and you're just not managing the game clock, that starts to wear on you and at least opens you up. I think you're at far less risk than falling behind against the Bears than even against Dallas, but it still exists. And when you talk about the wide receiver room, I think you always want to have some level of balance. We talked about this. I think Daniel Jones, listen, use the legs, baby. But the approach last week was use Richie James for his consistency, because that's what he's been doing for you. They started using Daniel Bellinger with a little bit more consistency. Concerns about his blocking ability starts to impact you. And then it's about who's the next guy, because now you don't even have Sterling Shepard on the field for you. And I already mentioned this yesterday about, I think, bring up Kahlil Pimpleton, has speed. He fills a role for you, especially if you're without Wan'Dale Robinson and Kadarius Toney. Then you have a like-for-like replacement there. You're still going to have Sills on the field. I start to look at a player like Darius Slayton. I want you to highlight what's going on in the secondary for the Chicago Bears, because I think that he is the kind of guy that has a track record of being able to do one very important thing that could really open up Chicago.
Yeah. So the interesting piece of this is, so the Chicago Bears have gone up against Trey Lance in a monsoon game for his first start of the year. And they also had Davis Mills last week. In between that, they had Aaron Rodgers, which put up 27 points, seemed to be working the ball through them. Their defense has not really faced, huge quarterbacks that have talent. We're going to find out where Daniel Jones stacks up against guys like Trey Lance and guys like Davis Mills pretty quickly because it's going to be a very, very similar defense with one exception. So far this season, Jalen Johnson, the cornerback from the Chicago Bears, came out of Utah. 2020 was a second-round pick for the Bears. He has been nothing short of tremendous this year, Adam. If you haven't heard of Jalen Johnson, he is arguably been playing at a top 5 cornerback level, like definitely at a Pro Bowl level, almost at an all-pro level is how good he has been. I think he's given up 1 reception on the entire year. He had a freak injury in practice where his quad kind of just popped or had some serious issue. Wasn't able to play last week. And, did a podcast, Chicago Bears podcast yesterday, came out and said, even if that was a playoff game last week, I wouldn't have been able to play. I don't want to hurt it again. I'm unsure. They probably are going to want me to sit another week. It sounds like everyone's pretty pessimistic about him getting out there. Adam, if he's not out there, they are extremely thin at cornerback. You have Kyle Gordon across the other way from him, who is a rookie this year, has a 46 Pro Football Focus, has been getting beat up all over the place. Adam, he has given up the most receptions against in the entire NFL. So imagine the Giants are taking out a top 5 cornerback that they're going to go up against, and they can pick off and they can focus on the guy that's given up the most receptions. The question is, do we have the firepower to take advantage of something like that?
Well, listen, that's why I mentioned Darius Slayton's name, because we know that he's fast. We know he can stretch the field. And I'm not telling you, he saw an uptick in his snap count this past week, the most that he's seen in the entire season. Now, you may say, but we didn't hear his name get called at all, so that could be equally as concerning. But the bottom line is he at least was out there. 14 reps, 19% against the Dallas Cowboys. I start with him. You've lost Sterling Shepard, so you put him out there, and you say, run the go route. And then I tell Daniel Jones, we're going to pick some spots for you to take a couple of shots. Now, the reality is I really want that functionality to open up the other opportunities. I want to put out Darius Slayton so that what is the hierarchy of who you want to match up with? Where, if you're the Chicago Bears, but it sounds crazy, but okay. Hey, David Sills, you slipped and you fell on what could have been a really big play against Dallas. You might get the best matchup on the field, right? And if you do, you got to be able to run crisp routes. You got to be able to sit down for Daniel Jones and move the effing chains. And I'm not even going to take an awful, completely dejected, disappointing Kenny Golladay off the table either here, because it's about just moving the ball incrementally down the field, matriculate down the field. But I think that Darius Slayton is maybe phase 1 of that. And I without any other options walking in the door here, with something could happen between now and Friday morning when we give our final preview, you bring up Kahlil Pimpleton. You got to bring him up. You went out, you plucked him off of it. He made it through waivers. You could have got back to the practice squad for Detroit. You went and got him for a reason. He fits the model of what Kafka wants. What are your other options? Who else are you going to?
I mean, it was my bet of the week last week in Richie James over yards, and he got it. It feels like right now, given the uncertainty,
and that's why I like Slayton too, to open it up for Richie James, right? Open up. So Richie James, man, you got to do something.
Think of it like this. Sterling Shepard was our, heart and soul, reliable slot guy. He's not there. Wan'Dale Robinson and Kadarius Toney are the short touch guys. The only one that's left out of that group is Richie James over the middle, and I feel like he's going to be very, very active in this. We don't know what we're getting from Darius Slayton. We don't know what we're going to get from Kenny Golladay. It really is a huge question mark, and I think that's going to be the determining factor of the game, Adam, is really whether or not the Giants wide receivers can take advantage of a depleted Bears secondary, and can someone like Kenny Golladay, if he gets reps, because it hasn't looked like it so far this year, can he take advantage of a matchup like against Kyle Gordon, or take up a matchup against Kendall Vilder, who is another cornerback who's been getting beat consistently this season?
Yeah, and I'll go back to this this Dallas game, where when you look down the breakdown, we said this in the post game, all the players that had receptions, it's all for about 8 to 10 yards, but just some difficulties there. But Barkley had 4 for 45, Bellinger had 4 for 40, James had 4 for 36, David Sills 2 for 20, could have been 3 for 35 if he doesn't fall down there. But my point there being is, I'll also keep an eye for Matt Breida. He didn't get a lot of reps. I don't know. And I don't know where you go from here, but I think you try to manufacture it. And there is some part of me that says tight end room has kind of been this little reliable safety valve every single week. It's a different one, but they're always using somebody. maybe they try to fold him in. As we know, the difficulty is the protection piece. And we mentioned yesterday, Tanner Hudson, very good in pass protection coming out of that game against Dallas. Wouldn't be shocked if he maybe is someone that helps them move the ball a little bit. I think this is gonna be chunk, and maybe you try to take those exposing plays against a suspect secondary.
It feels like all hands on deck. It really does. It's like, give me one catch, Kenny Golladay. Give me 2 catches, Daniel Bellinger. Tanner Hudson, block well. Like, everyone's going to have to do a little bit of everything. I don't think this is going to be one of those games where you see someone get 8 catches or 10 catches or go over 100 yards. It feels like you're going to have to spread it out in order to win this game.
Yes, sir. At the end of the day, my friends, we know we'll have more to come in on Friday morning, taking a look, as we say, at the end of the day. What are the expectations here? Can Daniel Jones duplicate the running success that he had against Dallas, and then maybe just, well, in some regards, have his receivers catch the ball? That would be a nice plus as well. But you got to find a way to manufacture this. We don't look ahead on this podcast, but you do know what's looming in the next couple of weeks. So getting to 3-1 becomes somewhat important. You're going to be at home. We'll talk about those prop lines. We'll give you Andy's bet of the week and so much more. In the meantime, you get over to YouTube, you follow us, you subscribe, you get the podcast feed wherever you get those needs fulfilled. And as Andy Mackowitz would want, need, and nay, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.